Hello and welcome everyone.
Zula.
Hello and welcome everyone to this Global
Kiribati.
Maritime Technology webinar. My name is Petra Ahari and I'm the project officer at the EC and IMO's Global MTCC Network project, the GMN. The main purpose of this webinar today is to identify and discuss the barriers and opportunities for maritime energy efficiency technologies in the Pacific region. Now, before we start, I would like to provide some housekeeping information. So first of all, the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared after the webinar on the GMN website. The webinar will run for approximately 1 hour 30 minutes. Please use the Q&A window to ask questions during the webinar, and all questions will be answered after the presentation during the Q&A session. The meeting agenda is broken down as follows. First, we will have one introductory presentation on the GMN project and a short overview of IMO GHG initiatives. This will be followed by presentation from MTCC Pacific on barriers and opportunities for low zero carbon shipping, and the webinar will end with a panel discussion. The meeting is scheduled to finish at 11:30 Fiji time. So let me introduce you to the speakers. We have Anton Rods, the GMN project manager, Mohamed Zula, head of MTCC Pacific, Ora Toa, maritime training advisor and GHG officer, MTCC Pacific, Roika Butition, director of maritime, Kiribati, Mr. Thierry Nerval, director of Solomon Islands Maritime Authority, Mr. Dominik Borowski, project director at GIZ, and Karl Probert, owner of CMC Holding. Before we begin, it should also be noted that the opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and may not necessarily represent the views of IMO or EC. Now, with that, I would like to invite Mr. Anton Rods, the GMN project manager, to provide welcome remarks. Over to you, Anton.
Great, Petra, thanks very much. Good morning and good evening to wherever you are. I'd like to thank the panelists and the attendees for your time to join this GMN webinar. Before I get started, I just want to apologize if I appear a little bit tired. It's after 12 a.m. where I am. And I have to say, I sympathize with my colleagues from the Pacific who have to deal with this issue of time difference on a regular basis. So please bear with me as we go through the webinar. I'll be brief in my introduction. As you know, shipping is part of the climate change challenge, and being the UN regulatory body for shipping, tackling climate change is also a major challenge for IMO. But this fight against climate change started many years ago when IMO adopted MARPOL Annex 6, which mandated operational and design requirements for ships. And further on, IMO continued the journey by adopting a GHG reduction strategy. As of last week, you might have heard that IMO made another important milestone when the MEPC adopted further measures to add on to the MARPOL Annex 6 requirements, agreeing on an energy efficiency existing ship index, EEXI, and also the carbon intensity indicator, CII, which will come into force next year. IMO has also adopted a work plan on looking at the mid and long-term measures. Whilst progress is being made, we have to consider the challenges of developing countries and especially the unique challenges of the small island developing states. And that, of course, is where the role of the MTCC Pacific is becoming very important. So I take this opportunity to thank MTCC Pacific for supporting this event, and I'd also like to acknowledge the European Union for providing steadfast support to the MTCC network. And again, I'd like to thank the panelists and all the attendees of this webinar for their presence. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anton, for the welcome remarks. And now for our first presentation, also to Anton Rhodes, the GMN project manager, who will also give us a brief overview of the GMN project before briefly introducing the GAG initiatives that are currently being implemented or due to be implemented soon by the Department of Partnerships and Projects at IMO. Over to you, Anton.
Okay, thanks, Petra. Can you see the slides? They're there? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let me introduce the GMN project and MTCC Pacific. But before I get into these details, I'd like to provide a bit of context in terms of the broader issue of shipping and GHG emissions. So the latest data shows that international shipping emits around 2% of global CO2 emissions. And whilst this is relatively modest compared to other sectors, there is a strong potential for this figure to grow if appropriate action is not undertaken. Put simply, as demand in global trade grows, so will shipping emissions. So to combat these shipping emissions, both real and potential, the IMO's initial GHG reduction strategy was adopted in 2018, and this sets out a vision to phase out GHG emissions as soon as possible in this century. Within the strategy, there are targets, such as a 50% reduction in GHG emissions from shipping by 2050. The big focus now, of course, is on how the targets will be achieved. As follow-up to the strategy, the IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee, MEPC, is now focused on agreement of short, medium, and long-term measures. The type of measures being proposed by member states include strengthening ship design and operational requirements, which I already mentioned. And also there are innovative measures such as low carbon or zero carbon fuels and technologies that might represent at least 50% of the overall reduction effort. In summary, big changes in the shipping sector are now urgently required. To achieve these changes, though, it requires an unprecedented level of collaboration across the entire global maritime value chain. And it's been encouraging that since adoption of the initial strategy, several partnership initiatives like the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership have built momentum for lower emission shipping. And within IMO's new Department for Partnerships and Projects, there is a growing portfolio of GHG-focused projects and initiatives. These include the Green Voyage Project, GHG Smart, the Innovation Forum, NextGen, Global Industry Alliance, and FinSmart. So there's a great deal of activity in this area. Now, as part of this move towards greater collaboration, there is also recognition that leaving nobody behind is of crucial importance for the successful implementation of the strategy. This relates most specifically to the challenges being faced by SIDS and LDCs, least developed countries. Regions like the Pacific must be supported if they're expected to contribute. And it's within this space of providing technical support and capacity building that the GMN project is playing an important role. So a brief overview of the GMN project. This is an EU and IMO partnership project launched in 2016 with funding of 10 million euros. The GMN is focused on supporting LDCs and SIDS to reduce GHG emissions from the shipping sector. To achieve this objective, Maritime Technology Cooperation Centres, MTCCs, have been established in 5 developing regions: Africa, Asia, Caribbean, Latin America, and Pacific. Now, I think it's important to explain the GMN concept, because it is different from the usual IMO approach to capacity building. Instead of activities and events being organized from IMO headquarters, the GMN approach is that a much greater level of responsibility is handed over to the participating regions. MTCCs manage their own budgets, they develop and implement their own work plans, and they employ their own staff. The intention with this approach is that we help to institutionalize capacity building in the regions. And of course, this is focusing on the long-term perspective. It's very much the intention that these centers will become fully self-sustaining, continuing long into the future. And I should emphasize the point here that the project has created more ownership and achieved far more than was originally foreseen. Based upon feedback from participating countries, the centers are a great success and are looked at as a new way of undertaking regional cooperation. So having given this introduction of the project, what I'd like to do now is shine a spotlight on MTCC Pacific to give you a clearer picture of what the centers have been doing in the particular regions. So in the Pacific, the team consists of 3 full-time and 1 part-time staff. The team are based within the SPC headquarters in Fiji, except for one of the technical officers who is based in Samoa at the newly established branch office. Since the center's launch in 2017, the team has been very active in engaging across the region. For example, there has been technical training provided in 8 different countries to ship operators and maritime administrators. And the MTCC has assisted in the implementation of ship energy efficiency management plans on 39 separate vessels. The center has also been driving the agenda of energy efficiency improvements in shipping by organizing several regional ministers meetings on the subject. But I think most impressive of the MTCC achievements has focused on their work to retrofit vessels and also to help improve port infrastructure. In 2019, the MTCC team completed the retrofitting of a landing vessel in Vanuatu and also applied improved operational measures to the vessel. The results have been very impressive, and any chance we've had, we've been promoting these results. The findings show that energy consumption was reduced by 43%, with an estimated annual GHG reduction of 101 tons. Cost savings were projected at 48,000 Australian dollars per year. This type of improvement was replicated on another larger vessel in Samoa, also in 2019. The results were very similar, with significant cost savings and GHG reductions. I was actually lucky enough to visit this vessel, and I think with all of the attendees for the opening of the vessel's new improvements, everyone was impressed with the modifications which have been undertaken by the MTCC. It was fantastic to see the fruits of all that hard work coming to fruition. The Pacific Center, as I mentioned earlier, has also worked with selected ports to help make energy efficiency improvements, undertaking no less than 12 port energy audits in 8 different countries, which have led to major improvements. For example, the MTCC audit in the Solomon Islands led to new infrastructure being built and new measures being introduced. Again, very good statistics showing overall energy use in Oniara Port dropped by 8%, with significant GHG emissions reductions and also cost savings. Again, this type of audit followed by infrastructure improvement was replicated in other countries such as Fiji with similar results. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd say in summary, the impact of the MTCC Pacific has been very clear. They're producing quantifiable results in terms of GHG reduction. And I think also perhaps just important, or even more important, is that these improvements are highlighting to key stakeholders in the region the cost benefits of investing in new technologies and applying energy efficiency measures. So the potential for replication and expansion is very great, coming on the back of these MTCC activities. That concludes the presentation, so I'll hand back to Petra. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Anton, for your presentation. And now I'd like to give the floor to our MTCC Pacific colleagues who are going to present on the main theme of the webinar, looking at the barriers and opportunities for low zero carbon shipping in the Pacific. So the floor is yours, Zula.
Hello.
Is your internet connection? I know there were some issues with internet connection at the moment. Let's see if Zula can connect.
Hello, good morning. I hope you guys can hear me. Unfortunately, it's just worst time for me, I guess, right now, because I'm just getting these messages that the internet connection is unstable. But anyway, I hope
if you give us a
voice
second,
is clear. I'll keep the camera off. Petra, if you don't mind, please. Yeah.
Okay, we will upload your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's up. Again, apologies. There's nothing more I can do from this side here, apart from changing from one service provider to the other one. But it seems that it's a bit okay now. So I'll just my presentation is more on the brief overview of our work in the region, and more specifically in terms of our work on the ground with the ship operators, and some of the work that we have done with the maritime administrations of the target countries. So going on to the next slide, please. This slide, basically, I guess, like I don't really have to say much about the Paris Agreement and IMO GHG initial strategy, but from the Pacific region, all the Pacific Island countries have developed their national plans and have strategies with objectives that basically line with the SDGs, more specifically the SDG 7 and 13. And then within the region, we have leaders, regional commitment by the leaders, starting with the 2013 Majuro Declaration for Climate Leadership, which basically entails every government, every company, every organization, and every person with the capacity to do so, both individually and collectively, to act urgently to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. The next is the Samoa pathway, which was in 2014. This was during the third international conference on small island developing states, which resulted in intergovernmental outcome document. And there was a particular focus on one of the sections that recognizes the importance of sustainable transport to the development of cities, and the commitment they made to support the efforts of the cities to access environmentally sound, safe, affordable, and well-maintained transportation system, which further entailed to support the policies that take a life cycle approach and increase energy efficiency in the transport sector. In 2015, there's a Suva Declaration on Climate Change, and in particular, the focus is on one of the paragraph 19F that reaffirms the commitments emphasizing the role of sea transport. Quoting one of the sentence from the declaration: an integrated approach to transitioning the Pacific countries to low carbon transport futures, in particular sea transport, given its central role in providing connectivity for Pacific seats, including the regional strategy to advocate for and monitor implementation of sector targets through relevant UN agencies, commensurate with the 1.5-degree threshold. Furthermore, we in 2017, we had the Tony de Bruym Declaration that calls on international shipping industry, like all other sectors of human activity, to take urgent action with respect to climate change. And in 2018, during a transport forum, the Laudala Declaration on Decarbonization of Pacific Island Transportation was launched, which was a commitment to act as local, regional, and global advocate in support of transport sector decarbonization by 2050, and requested the global community to support this declaration and the initiative it contains, and in particular to prioritize investment and technology transfer to support Pacific transportation decarbonization policies and enable energy, education, and investment policies. And the latest regional meeting was in 2019, the fourth Pacific Regional Energy and Transport Ministers meeting that recognized the urgent reforms that is required in both energy and transport sector in the Pacific Island countries and territory in order to maximize the region's contribution to global efforts to reduce GHG emission. The ministers also uploaded the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership and were in agreement to work towards the ambitious partnership's target for domestic shipping in the Pacific Island countries to reduce GHG emission by 40% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. As you can see from this slide, the most recent developments from the developments from 2013 in the Pacific region is quite clear. The directions is set by the leaders to fully decarbonize the Pacific transport sector by 2050, but we're also mobilizing the Pacific Island countries to advocate for the same targets within the international shipping sector. For the region, basically there's a regional initiative for short, medium, and long-term actions that is needed to meet this objective. But at the same time, there's also a need to build up on the existing 2020-2030 programs and measure above. And at the same time, we need to start looking at allowing the implementation of global vessel replacement, port development programs, and of course, large-scale financing in the Pacific to achieve the decarbonization objective, which is discussed by the Pacific Island leaders. And more specifically, the development needs of the region is to support the community-based approaches to the mobility of people and goods in the people, with the emphasis on the needs and rights of communities to mobility. Next slide, please. Now, this is just to give a quick a snapshot of the consultation MTCC had carried during various workshops around the target countries and collected information from various sources, including consultation during regional workshops. And these consultations were conducted most basically in 8 selected Pacific Island countries. And during these events, during the regional events, we widened the consultation to the whole region, including territories, to review the first round of consultation results and prioritize actions for short, medium, and long term. We had examined existing initiatives in the region as well as available technology that can contribute to our objective. We also identified barriers to technology transfer, more specifically such as lack of reliable and accurate data on energy consumption, GHG emission from the maritime, the absence of policies, laws, and standards, lack of capacity to update new technologies, and limited financial resources within the private sector and the government to address those environmental challenges. And some of the technologies which were readily available in the region have been demonstrated as pilot project on 2 inter-island vessels in Vanuatu and in Samoa. Next, please. So giving a bit of a Pacific view of the domestic fleet. So in the Pacific, there are mostly private ship operators. However, it is difficult to determine from ship registries whether particular companies are in fact owned or operated under public control, given external influences in some cases. Regardless of ship ownership, the majority of ship operators manages only 1 or 2 ships, oftenly on routes that do not provide sufficient profitability. This lends to the lack of resources and capacity, preventing investment in ship energy efficiency and ship safety. We also have confirmed public ship operators, including some of the government-owned vessels that fall under many service providers, typically state-owned enterprises, and other specialized departments such as Navy and Police. And the main focus of the domestic ship is mainly involves the use of small or non-conventional vessels that service main governmental or commercial centers and other islands within the country. And in some countries, we have convention-sized vessels service such as domestic routes and even neighboring countries or territories. The domestic ships are invariably flagged and registered locally and thus are subjected to local standards and flag state implementation regimes. So in order to better understand the current status of more than 2,000 registered vessels in the region, MTCC Pacific selected target countries just to provide a snapshot of the fleet overall that summarizes from the registries. So from the 7 countries, we found out that 110 vessels are built within the last 20 years, that is post 2000. 55 are less than 30 years old, and nearly 100 of them are more than 40 years or more older, therefore beyond their design life. And approximately 60% are pre-2000, which basically demonstrate to us in a bigger fleet countries like Solomon Island, Fiji, the age of the fleets are aging quite fast. And this excludes fishing and tourist leisure vessels. And unfortunately, some Pacific Island countries and allow importation of extremely old vessels that are without proper survey certificate of compliance, or even when built after 2012, they do not meet the new ship energy efficiency standard. So predominantly, the vessel type is designed for passenger use only, followed by a number of tourist-related vessels that mostly operate in Fiji, and subsequently we have got similar numbers of tugs, cargo, passenger, and landing craft. Next slide, please. So from the regional or from the 8 countries approach, we break down into a more specific country profiles, and this approach or driver the positive outcomes of our consultation, as I mentioned earlier, led to the development of country profiles with the focal points in maritime administration. And over the past years, we had identified certain technologies, needs, barriers, and also relevant action, which is encompassed in a living document, which is updated frequently with the country focal points. In this document, there are various sections that provides information on the country's ship operators profile, including private and public ownership, number of vessels operated, and the information is further broken down into table graphs with at least the details of vessel type, length, gross tonnage, age, and main engine. So this information is used to analyze the probability of the existing vessels, which will be still operational in 2030 and beyond, and the perspective of vessels being replaced or retrofitted during this period. A section is also on the international vessels, but basically more on the traffics to the Pacific port. In case of more specifically with the Samoa case, our analysis have indicated that the vessels that operate in Samoa can be categorized in three categories, where one is less than 10 years, the other one is between 10 to 20 years, and the last section is vessels beyond 30 years. And from this, what we have found that in the next 10 years, 17% of the vessel will be beyond 40 years old. And similarly, the rest 83% of the vessel will need to be retrofitted with energy efficiency or energy saving devices to reduce fuel consumption. So building on the MTCC pilot project initiative, the operational and technological measures could have a significant contribution to reducing GHG emission. We are looking more specifically with at the different type of vessels that operate in the region and provide a list of measures that may be implemented on board the domestic vessels, including ship energy efficiency management plan, to collect relevant data and also to provide a feedback to the ship owner into the return of investment versus the fuel consumption saving. And this is actually a great opportunity also. This document is also can be used for vessel replacement program and various operational and technology measures to From the information and the data presented, countries now can understand the importance of ship energy efficiency and its benefit as a ship operator in terms of saving, and also having a suitable return of investment, and in the last resort is basically just to replace the vessel itself. Next slide, please. This basically just to give a quick overview of the MTCC Pacific, but generally the slides that I have presented entails that there needs to be a paradigm shift for Pacific in terms of small, medium sized maritime enterprises to improve energy efficiency of their business, energy efficiency of their vessels, and efficiency of their business, and also to understand the benefit of embracing a low carbon future. We are also focusing our support to the private sector and have seen that the core of initiative of some of the development partners in the region are to improve the energy efficiency and also to support development of government policies, and together with the capacity development, business management, and financing, the support to the private sector will definitely stimulate job growth and investment, and in turn help increase profitability of the maritime business in the Pacific region. Therefore, the support to the private sector will also involve solve enterprise operating technologies and equipment. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Now over to Petra for the next presentation.
Thank you, Zula. Can I hand over to Ora now, please, for the next presentation?
Unfortunately, Ore is not able to connect from PNG, so I'll present on her behalf on the next presentation.
Understand. Okay, so we will upload the next presentation. One moment, please.
Thank you very much, Petra. Now to the next one. This basically is a summary of some of the needs and barriers and opportunities that are available in the region. Next slide, please. So before I proceed into the needs and barriers, I'd like to first discuss about our approach. So MTCC has been operational since 2017, as I mentioned earlier, and we have been promoting low carbon maritime transport that supports sustainable development goals of the Pacific Island countries and territories, and also the transition towards a greener economy. The vision is to transition towards a greener economy in the Pacific and adopt national approaches to uptake low carbon technologies and operation within the maritime sector. Capacity building is basically at the core of the requirement for the Pacific countries, and to understand the importance of this transition. We had provided capacity building activities both nationally and regionally to improve the understanding of the Pacific Island countries to comply with international instruments, and also to facilitate the implementation of energy efficient measures in the maritime industries. So our workshops were built on the importance of data and how data can enable MTCCs to provide support back to the ship operator with regards to reducing GHG emission and reliance on fossil fuel. This will also, our initiative also supports the informed policy decision making at regional level and also at national level. And it also helps to build the capacity of the ports and ship operators to invest in low carbon technologies. In saying this, can also relate to the work MTCC is doing on board domestic vessels, that is basically working with other programs to improve safety and energy efficiency on board domestic vessel. So to raise the standard of domestic shipping. So we have a safe operational plan that is integrated with a SIMP on board the vessel with a program that is running at a SPC known as the Pacific Island Domestic Ship Safety Program. So with the relevant data, MTCC will then provide technical advice on the type of technology to uptake and work with ship owners from design phase to testing and commissioning. Next slide, please. So one of the example of the pilot project that was carried out in Vanuatu was on a vessel called LCTV Trader, Landing Craft TV Trader. The vessel was selected for the pilot project after it successfully implemented the safe operational plan, and which is integrated with the ship energy efficiency management plan, and had consistently collected fuel oil consumption data. So after fulfilling the requirement and the prerequisite for our pilot project, the vessel was chosen for the pilot project. So we installed a solar PV system to onboard the vessel that basically provides renewable energy lighting, air conditioning, fresh water pump, and general purpose outlet. Some of the current challenges we are facing with the data collection is there's a crew changing, and also in some case timely fuel data consumption reporting. For fuel consumption from there's a significant decrease in the fuel consumption at Anchorage, mostly because the generators are turned off and then the solar system is fully utilized for the essential
Zula, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, you are back now. Thank you.
Back now. I'm sorry, I don't know where you guys lost me, but I'll probably just touch on the fuel consumption part. So the fuel consumption data for this vessel have shown there's a significant reduction in fuel consumption, also GHG emission, and there is an increase in percentage saving in both operational and financially. So the ship operator have utilized these savings to improve the vessel condition. And some of the other factors that affect the fuel consumption of the vessel is the ship scheduling, cargo on board, and passenger on board the vessel, and fuel prices. Next slide, please. So for moving on to the medium and long-term perspective, so the mobility in the Pacific underpins the sustainable development of the small island developing states. In the Pacific Island countries, the maritime sector offers a wide range of opportunities that basically range from fisheries, maritime tourism, to leisure and shipping. These sectors provide essential services, jobs, and resources for the community livelihood, and are also critical for supporting the socio-economic needs such as education, healthcare, employment, tourism, emergency services, import and export of materials and goods. The mobility and safe transport of people and goods between the outer island and to and from the main centers is crucial. There's a need to reduce reliance on fossil fuel and GHG emission from this sector, and there's also an opportunity to introduce modern practices and revive cultural heritage, supporting economic development. Complementary projects should also be included in this approach. One good example is the SPC Green Pacific project approach that was piloted in Tonga and Solomon Islands that had achieved significant reduction of energy consumption and GHG emissions from its operation and infrastructure. And this kind of initiative included measures related to promoting green shipping, pollution prevention, energy management, and climate resilience of port infrastructure and operations. Now, all the pilot projects in the region need to focus on collection and analysis of data, more specifically the energy consumption and GHG emission, to inform and guide the operators towards energy efficient operation and investment in new technologies and new concept vessels and equipment. This kind of approach to data collection can clearly demonstrate the potential and benefit of uptaking new technologies, and modeling the data with information related to Pacific Fleet will also inform the baseline targets policy and decision making. So in preparation for the 2050, applied research is also an essential component that needs to be undertaken in partnership with leading research institute in developed countries. Next slide, please. Hello. Thank you very much, Petra. Thank you everyone for your kind attention. And I'm sorry actually, because I've been seeing these unstable internet messages on my screen. I'm not so sure how much actually went through, but as Petra mentioned, the presentation will be shared with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zula, and we appreciate that the connection is not ideal. So thank you for managing. So this leads us very nicely to the panel discussion. So I saw that we've received some questions in the comment section, so we will do our best to answer all of them. If you have some further questions, please do send them through via the Q&A window. I think we can start with question for Thierry. Thierry, what do you think is hindering the deployment and diffusion of the energy efficient technology on board domestic vessel? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Petra, and very good morning and very good evening to you all. So I'm Thierry Nerval. I'm the director of the Solomon Islands Maritime Authority in Honiara. So I took my function last year in May 2020. So since that I'm here to establish the new Maritime Authority. So we moved from Department of the government to an independent authority. So we are just completing the recruitment of all staff, and our finance are in place, and we have started some activities that are linked to the corporate plan that was adopted at the beginning of the year. So we have now a corporate plan for the next 3 years. So one of the points I'd like to make is just to provide a bit of context and background information on Solomon Islands domestic shipping. So here we have quite a large number of domestic vessels. So domestic vessels are mainly vessels carry passengers and goods to outer islands. But we have also a lot of tugboats, because we have logging and mining activities around the country, and we have smaller vessels doing some work here and there in the country. So, but the main issue here is we have a lot of competition, and the industry is struggling even more now with COVID-19. But the industry is struggling to make the shipping here profitable, and we know that there are low margin made by these shipping companies. In addition to that, there is a lot of there is some public intervention in shipping that is not really coordinated, so it makes it difficult for private sector to conduct shipping operations and to operate vessels. And there is also, and even recently, because less work was available in country for domestic vessels, a bit of unfair competition between some of the subsectors of domestic shipping. And because we have a lot of landing craft operated for logging and mining companies that sometimes come opportunistically in the carriage of goods and passengers. And so this creates some unfair competition, and it's very difficult to manage. And on top of that, so we have an over tonnaging fleet here. We have too many vessels, and so it's very difficult for the ship operators to really secure their the markets and ensure they provide reliable shipping. So we have quite a few challenges to manage. So in addition to that, we really need to approach the ship operators for them to understand some of the questions related to greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency, first for their benefits, but also because Solomon Islands has a clear strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's in our NDCs. It includes transport. And at the moment, we have some projects with the Ministry of Environment to all together throughout sectors contribute to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But first, evaluate the greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors. So the question for us is more how we engage with the private sector, with the ship operators. And I see first a question of capacity and understanding of benefits from these technologies, but also for the ship operators to understand that this is the way forward, and there is no other way around than going towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
I'm sorry, Thierry. I'm sorry, Thierry. One of our panelists has microphone on. Can
I have some trouble with the link not working, but I will be in the sign.
Can I please ask all panelists to mute their microphone? Thank you.
Okay.
So in terms of our approach, as I said, we really need to convince the maritime industry that this is the way forward. There is no other way around. I was saying it's in Solomon Islands strategy, but we also need to bring here some technologies, some projects, and maybe trial some technology to prove that we can achieve our objectives. So at the moment we have now committed to partner in the Green Voyage 2050 project. So we are starting some activities. First activities will be to assess maritime greenhouse gas emissions. And so we should start that soon. We have established a national task force, which is with our Marine Advisory Pollution Committee. And so we are all looking at some project to help us showing the way forward, and then demonstrating some opportunities to the private sector. More recently, we had also some conversation with through the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership and the University of New South Wales, also maybe for some demonstration project in the future. So it's really something that we need to look at and to bring here in Solomon Islands if we really want to move forward. And one of the last point I'd like to make, it's also about capacity of our crew. Yeah, the crews on board domestic vessels here are sometimes sometimes they lack a bit of seamanship and basic routine in operating vessels that has been lost, I think, throughout the years, and we really need to rebuild, because if we want to have new type of vessels and new type of technologies, then the crews will have also to step up, and it will be a major challenge for us here in Solomon Islands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thierry. Thank you for the response. We can move on to another question. We have a question for Mr. Borowski. The question is, how can we ensure there is long-term strategic investment planning?
Hello, Petra. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry, I just tuned in, so I hope I can answer the question sufficiently. Maybe on the basis of our project that we are conducting. That's mainly happening in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, where we about to well, we have designed a new low carbon vessel for the state-owned fleet of the Marshall Islands, and we are about to build this vessel. So of course, on this subject, it is important to almost to achieve the almost impossible, to have a low carbon vessel, which in our case is supposed to emit 70% less emissions than a regular vessel, and on the other hand be affordable. Yeah, and so when you're talking about an investment, you're the only chance for upscaling this type of low carbon vessels if it's affordable. So what we have done so far is that we conducted the tender design, or elaborated a tender design that will be free of copyright to all, also to to further interested parties in the Pacific Island countries, and also to go for a classification, to have this vessel in a classified class. So it is really will be in the future will be easier for maintenance. Yeah, that's what I could share in a moment. I hope you got your question right. I got your question right.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mr. Probert has a hand up. I'm not sure if you wanted to comment, if you had some additional points to this question or to the previous.
Hi, hi everyone. Thank you. I had some comment for the previous question. First of all, we formed a industry association in Fiji called the Sustainable Sea Transport Initiative. We formed it earlier this year, and the reason we did that was to address these very problems. So, I mean, back to the original question about what are some of the barriers, or why is there not a lot more uptake of energy efficient measures in the Pacific? And I think it's everything that the gentleman was saying from the Solomons. The operators are, they have older vessels, they have enough issues dealing with antiquated vessels, and the crews, I'm sure the crews take up a lot of the time. And I mean, it's difficult to even get them to install vessel tracking for the domestic ships. So you can imagine trying to implement any kind of other new technology that might be related to energy efficiency. The only thing that's going through their mind is it's yet another thing to monitor and maintain. So the ultimate, actually back to why it's also difficult is, while there is a lot in terms of high level policy, there is no real incentive or support for energy efficiency and sustainable sea practices or initiatives. In Fiji, the fuel is heavily subsidized by government, for one, and the regulations also don't really support any type of sort of initiative towards this. So solutions wise, we do think that there needs, the real solution needs to be a real, like if there is a paradigm shift to be had, we need to adopt almost like a first principles thinking in regards to this, where we are not adopting solutions and technologies that are developed elsewhere in the world. We like they're doing in the Marshall Islands, we need to be developing the solutions locally, and then also getting the regulatory support to ensure that these solutions are feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a raised hand from Mr. Borowski. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to use the chance, maybe while Thierry is with us, and my question would be on maintenance and the dry docking, because we know that one important factor in energy efficiency of ships is proper maintenance, and some of the measures you need to find a shipyard with a proper dry dock, to when it comes to hull coating, painting, other measures. And I wonder, because there is a shortage of those facilities in the region, I wonder, for example, in the case of Solomon Islands, how do you, or where do you send your vessels for dry docking, and how do you do the maintenance?
Thierry, do you wish to react? Okay. Mr. Probert, please.
Yeah. So I just had a comment with regards to the dry docking. Even I think, we need to think about the solution from the bottom up and in all facets of maritime. So, even understanding how the supply chain works, what not be restricted to the existing ports, but how those can be optimized, or how we can build new low impact jetties that have better access to all of these outer islands, and tied in with the type of sustainable shipping solutions that we do have. I think if we have more customized vessels to service the islands properly, then we can understand and probably improve docking facilities. They probably do not have to be as big as required by current large ships.
Thank you. I think this is opportunity to take a question. We received questions from the audience, and this is question for that I think should be directed at Zula. I didn't quite understand the scope of MTCC. When we talk about zero carbon shipping, do we include carbon emissions from operations or ports, beside from ships at ports? When talking about challenges from SIDS and LDCs, what is the focus of capacity building, vessels flying flags of these countries, or countries providing service to these regions?
Thank you, Petra. Thank you, Zhao, for the question. Now, with regards to the scope of MTCC,
Zula, can you hear us? Okay, so I think let's move to another question, and let's hope Zula's internet will come back. We have a question that I would like to direct to Mr. Chion. The question is, there is a need to improve the quality of data and information to be better able to formulate decarbonization targets and strategies. report GHG emissions, make decisions on transport systems, and monitor and evaluate projects and their progress. What steps need to be taken to strengthen data collection?
Thank you, Petra, and very good morning to everyone, and good evening. And yeah, this is Roy from Kiribati. As Petra already introduced me, I'm the director of Maritime at Kiribati, and thank you for having me as part of the among the panelists. And very good to see you all to meet with you online. Yeah, thank you very much also for the question for Kiribati. And yeah, and as you may know, before I get on to the question, the Kiribati Maritime is still a division of the Maritime Ministry of Transport in Kiribati. And we are not yet becoming an authority, but we are still progressing, moving on to become an authority in the medium-term approach in Kiribati. The need to improve the quality of data information to be better able to formulate the decarbonization, especially with the targets and strategies in Kiribati. Of course, as you may acknowledge, Kiribati is having, facing a lot of challenges. And I align myself also with my other colleagues in the Pacific Islands facing the same difficulty. We have quite a big challenge here, and I also wish to extend my appreciation and acknowledgement to our partners in their support to Kiribati. There's a need to improve the collection of data in Kiribati. The MTCC Pacific has been also conducting some workshops in Kiribati to build ship operators' capacity on fuel data collection. This is since 2017. And further, the MTCC Pacific has also conducted the onboard trainings with our domestic crews here in Kiribati on the implementation of SMS and SAMP. And it's sad to say that the collection of data has been constrained by most of our ship operators. So what theory had also mentioned in his statement, our crews needs to be upskilled, and not only that, but also the ship operators operating the local vessels. And Kiribati ships are mostly very old ships. 70% more than, I would say, more than 35 years old, and the rest are the 20 years, and only a few that less than 5 years. And we need to also liaise with our local stakeholders, with our Ministry of Infrastructure and Sustainable Energy department, and also to enable them to know exactly what the type of data that is needed. We need also to have a policy in place, and we need also the support from not only from government but also from our development partners in compliance for in complying to especially the MAPA on X6 on the gas emissions, and to have also the monitoring and implementation looked at. The developing the new template that MTC Pacific has shared with our ship operators and with the stakeholders. That I think that's we also need to how can I say, to change the wordings to our local language. So we have Kiribati and English version in the template, so that our crews, existing crews on our missions, are able to fill in the what is needed for the data collection. Other than that, we need to have also the capacity building and to be continued in place for our new existing our ship operators coming into the industry. And overall, the Kiribati Maritime is trying its best to improve the data collection from all of our ships operators.
Thank you. Thank you for the insightful response. Thierry, would you like to add any points?
Yes, I just wanted to emphasize something specifically related to maritime administrations. And so I was thinking about that because my colleague from Kiribati, Captain Roy, was talking about our role and what is the role of the maritime administrations now to prepare for the next 10 years change and the next 30 years, management of some of these issues. The problem for us at the moment is the everyday life in the maritime administration. It's really challenging. So for my everyday work is dealing with overloading of vessels, huge problem of safety and inspections that are not really satisfactory, and crew qualifications that are not at the level. And so in the middle of this everyday and short-term issues we have, how the administration can take the lead and can keep the momentum on some of these issues that we are talking about. And we are talking about the next 10 years, the next 30 years. And so what we are putting in place now is for the next 30 years. And so this competition between the everyday urgency of our common issues and the long-term strategy and vision that we must have with our ship operator is really, really challenging to reconcile. And so the capacity of the maritime administration also to take the lead and to be able to coordinate projects in the future, develop the policies, adopt the regulations, to take up a new way of operating vessels and technologies is something that we really need to build in the project that will come soon. Otherwise, we had the experience from some of the projects in the past. You have some activities, you have good impact over 5 years, and then when the project stops, everything collapses. So in some cases, the ships are just stopped and they are abandoned here along the coast, but here, when we are implementing projects, it's because we want to have impact for the next 20 or 30 years. And so we'll need to have the capacity to sustain that for the long term. And so it's how we build that in the maritime administration and the industry to ensure the stability of this. Otherwise, we'll have medium-term impact, but not really what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry. We have one question for GMN. That's going to be for you, Anton. What were the reasons behind establishing the GMN project?
Petra, thank you. Yeah, the driving force behind the establishment of the GMN, it was really born out of the IMO member states recognizing that to achieve the GHG reduction targets, it had to be a kind of global solution. And it goes back to this point about leaving nobody behind. So any solution, it was recognized from an early point, would have to encompass developed and developing regions. It was born out of that drive, and there were IMO resolutions which focused on capacity building, sharing knowledge and technical capacity between developed and developing regions. And it was part of this drive, the need to improve and strengthen capacity building, that the GMN and other projects were born. I should mention the Glow Meat project was also really born out of this commitment from the IMO members. And it isn't just developing and developed countries, it's the need for cooperation between governments and private sector, ports and shipping. So it's this focus on the need for greater cooperation, more partnership. These were the big drivers that really led to the establishment of the GMN and similar projects as well.
Thank you. There is one question that I think could be directed at you. Anything on COVID and adaptation in the future?
Yeah, the COVID question has come up time and again in the different MTCC regions. There are plans. We're putting together concept notes for kind of a GMN phase 2, and within these concepts, there are elements which address COVID adaptation, and looking at the ways MTCCs can support the regions, and things like undertaking assessments of the COVID-19 impact on ports and shipping, potentially supply chains, and also assisting different parties, whether it's maritime administration, shipping industry, in determining a kind of recovery strategy. All of it focused on ensuring there is proper adaptation in the long term. So yes, it is something which has been considered for the future, and it is part of kind of future MTCC plans. Yeah.
Thank you, Anton. Jerry, do you have any comment?
No, sorry, not specifically on these points.
Sorry, I saw your hand.
Sorry.
No problem. No problem. I have a question that I suppose can be directed to anyone, whoever wishes to answer. How does port efficiency affect maritime transport costs and trade in the Pacific? Anyone wishes to answer? How does port efficiency affect maritime transport costs and trade in the Pacific?
Sorry, I'll just quickly say that it has huge impact on the costs of maritime transport in the Pacific, and it starts with the main port infrastructure, the costs that sort of start to surmount there. So, say in Fiji, in Suva in particular, the main wharf is so inadequate to handle the growing size of the ships and the frequency. I think there's only one section of the port that can actually handle any type of heavy cargo discharge. And so I think at the moment, I guess COVID has slowed down some of the maritime traffic, but post COVID with the cruise ships, it is very, very inadequate. So, and then that rolls on to the local port infrastructure. I mean, you can only see a few, I think it was last week, how just one or two local vessels arriving causes chaos at the wharf. And the fact that I think that there has been no technological uptake to improve freight movement, and the insistence on the old shipping model of moving passengers and cargo together make it both dangerous and very inefficient, and highly, and there's a whole lot of cost associated with that, which, unfortunately, the government sort of turns around and ends up having to subsidize.
Thank you. Anyone else on this point?
Yes, Petra, chair speaking. So yes, in this case, I raised my hand. So definitively, port have a role to play in the approach, and they need, and here in the Pacific, and it's the case for Solomon Islands, they need to continue to increase their efficiency to ensure we reduce as much as possible the time in ports. The issue is, and it's one of our questions here with the port authority, is we see in the near future this port to be congested and not able to cater for, as Carl said, the size of the vessel, but also the number of vessels. And we are also expecting after COVID, maybe a recovery phase that will bring more vessels here, and we'll have definitively some international vessels just waiting out of the port to load and discharge. And it may be a real bottleneck in the future if the port are not able to expand and to cater with vessel that will come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Probert, please.
Yeah, so again, it's infrastructure in general that does hinder the efficiencies. And we can see that, I think, here and around the Pacific, where even the main port, international port, the traffic associated with the movements of cargo and everything associated with port operations there severely impacts the operation and access to the local wharf that facilitates the local shipping. So, I mean, it just compounds the issue. And I will say that I do think something to think about is, I don't think government should necessarily be looking to expand its fleet significantly. I think it's quite counterproductive to, I know it's service to the people of the maritime region, but I think it does end up being very counterproductive to trying to improve maritime transport efficiency in the Pacific.
Zula, I saw you had a raised hand as well.
Yes, Petra. Well, thank you very much, Terry and Carl. Very interesting comments on the port, and it's just a bit of my comment on that. Generally, well, of course, as everybody knows, the transport cost represents basically the major component of the trade cost, and the efficiency of port operation has definitely direct impact on the efficiency of the entire logistic chain, I'd say, and along with the domestic and international freight corridors. And efficient ports will generally have shorter turnarounds. And it is very important to look at port efficiency, or maritime sector inclusive of ports efficiency, to determine basically how to lower the transportation cost. And more specifically, smaller ports can improve their energy efficiency, not really easily, but I'd say like doubling the port energy efficiency can reduce cost almost by half, which would basically mean reducing the distance between the countries. So in case of the PES reports, some of the lessons that we have learned, for example, more specifically talking about the port in Fiji, there was a so because of the unstable grid, the accessibility to onshore power supply is basically limited, and there is also a risk of overloading the local community supply. And unfortunately, we don't really have renewable energy technology that can be easily accessed from the main grid. And in most cases, the
Zula, can you hear us? Zula? It seems that we've lost him. I think we are slowly moving to the end of the allotted time. There was one more comment from Roy Kabute. Please feel free to take the floor.
Thank you, Petra. I just want to get back to the need to improve the quality of the data information, and also to, along with the formulation of decarbonization targets and strategies issue. And the I'm not sure with our colleagues in the Pacific, but in Kiribati, what Kiribati Maritime is now working towards is developing a unit, a unit with dedicated staff looking after the MAPA Annex 6, and also to in developing as well the policy that will clearly states the targets in the emission reduction. And I also acknowledge and I admire the work of the MTCC, the Micronesia Center for Sustainable Transport, which is a joint initiative of the government of the RMI and the University of the South Pacific, in implementing the framework to transition to low carbon transport solutions, which align with the National Paris Agreement emission reduction targets. And this is what I also, Kiribati, would like also to be part, and this has been also endorsed by our president in the last meeting with the president of Micronesia, Palau, FSM, and we thank the MSCs also, MSTC, MCST for their keenness to in this greenhouse gas emission policy. And when we have this the units properly established within our division, I think the compliance in improving the data collection and also in our strategies and targets will be, I think, will be better, uplifted in our compliance with the gas emission.
Thank you. I'm afraid that we are running out of the time. Carl, I don't know, your hand is raised. Did you still want to respond to this point, or it just
sorry,
stayed
I'll lower it.
Okay. So I think we can conclude the webinar. Before we conclude, I would like to extend a huge thank you to the speakers and panelists for their great contribution. And I would like to thank the audience as well for your participation. And I hope all of you found this webinar informative, and we will look forward to welcoming you next time. If you would like to find out more about GMN, then of course, visit our website at gmn.imo.org. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all a very nice day. Goodbye.